done self-government teaching tours in the United Kingdom and China. In 2009, Nicoleen and her family were featured in a 1-hour BBC documentary about parenting. She has appeared on various news shows and radio programs to discuss effective parenting. She is a popular public speaker, author of several books, including her acclaimed Parenting a House United. Nicoleen has been invited multiple times to speak at the United Nations and has been asked to serve as the president of a global organization called the Worldwide Organization for Women, which advocates for faith, family, and sovereignty. Thank you. Welcome, Nicoleen.
Thank you. Well, that was, thanks for clapping. You know, that was I'm totally kidding. Anyway, so we'll see who joins us after lunch. And if you guys can stay awake, did you get to have a nice full lunch so that you can, of course, this room, you're not going to get cozy. It's freezing in here, isn't it? My hands are ice cubes. So this class is called 5 Social Lessons Every Child Must Know. And I'm Nicoleen Peck. That's for the recording. Anyway, you guys know that. How many of you heard me speak the other day, or have heard me speak before? I'm just trying to check to gauge. Okay, so something like about half and half. All right. Just so that I'm not too repetitive on certain issues. That's why I wanted to check. Anyway, this should be some things that are new that we didn't talk about the other day, so that would be fun. And honestly, it's a topic that I think is so very, very important nowadays, and that is socialization, the social interaction that we have, that our children have, the social consequences, over-socialization. There's all kinds of things that relate to social that we're dealing with nowadays. I don't know if you all homeschool or if some of you are just pondering the idea of homeschooling, but when a person chooses to homeschool, there's this question that people always ask. And the question is, well, what about the social? That's what people always want to know. I don't know if you have an answer for that question, but I thought about it at the very beginning, because I've always homeschooled my children. So all the way up, my oldest is now 19, and my youngest is 11, and they've just homeschooled the whole way. And my father was a public school teacher and college professor, and when I said that I was going to homeschool my children, he said, well, what about the social? And then other people in the neighborhood and in the community and everything said, well, what about the social? Over and over again, and I thought, you know, I've got to come up with a proper understanding of what I am doing socially, and what about that social? How do I answer that question? And my answer turned out to be, you know, we think social is so important. Like, so important. In fact, that's one of the big reasons that we homeschool, is because of social. And we don't usually talk too much about it with people because we have found that some people have a different opinion of what proper socialization is than we do. And that's what we've decided to say. And very few people say, oh, let's discuss that. Most people just kind of go, oh, I never thought about there being multiple views, you know, on socialization and what is proper and that kind of thing. But I truly have thought a lot about socialization. I am a very, very social person, and I've always been that way. In fact, I would call that one of my strengths. And it just so happens that all of my children are also very, very social people. And so I want to talk about this today. One of my favorite movies, I'm sort of a musical theater junkie, because I was raised with a father who was a play director, and he put me on the stage from the time I was just young, and it was always musical theater. One of my very favorite plays / movies, and if you haven't seen the movie or shown it to your kids, it's a great one to watch, but it is 7 Brides for 7 Brothers. Do you love that too? It's such a good one. There's just so many great songs and moments in that show. Well, in 7 Brides for 7 Brothers, there's this wonderful scene where much fun. In fact, I think that's probably, besides the barn raising, gotta be one of my favorite scenes, right? So, anyway, the reason she started singing the Going Courtin' song, and Going Courtin' was a lesson. She was teaching a lesson to the boys, and this was a social lesson. The reason why she started to sing this song and teach them this social lesson was because they all had seen some girls in town. So they went to town, they'd seen some girls, and they really liked what they saw. They just never made it to town very much and apparently hadn't seen very many cute girls, and all of a sudden they wanted to know how to, pursue these girls. And so she said, well, let's do some practice. Pretend that you see the girl you like coming out of church and you want to strike up a conversation. What are you going to say? And Gideon, the youngest, goes, nice night for a coon hunt. And she said, no, that's not what you're going to say. That's not how we do this. She would run from you. She said you don't snatch up a girl like a flapjack. And anyway, and so she explains to the boys how to go courting. And this is a social lesson they had never had before. And it turns out to be quite transformational, actually. So, all of us learn socialization one of three ways. We either learn it, like Millie taught it, from our parents, or from our families, the people we live with, or we learn it from media and books and stuff like that, or we learn it from peers. So from friends and people our same age. Now, do you remember what the Ponape boys, now I know some of you maybe haven't seen this show, but so let me just, instead of saying do you remember, I'll just explain. I said the barn raising was my favorite scene, and the reason why the barn raising is my favorite scene is because there's some fabulous choreography in the barn raising, and it's really fun to watch how they choreograph this thing. But basically what happens is they put on their best manners. Millie gives them an inspection. They've got their fingernails clean, their hair done, and new shirts, and good manners, and they're helping Millie, and they unload the cart, and everything, and they've got the social graces down. She has trained them. They get there, and their peers, which are these other young guys who want to impress the same exact girls, are feeling very competitive. Now, they had promised Millie no fighting because they'd already fought with these boys in town. And so they were holding back, having self-government, not fighting. And then they kept getting hit with boards and punched accidentally or whatever it was. And finally, somebody dropped a hammer on Adam's head, and he wasn't even part of the whole love fit that they were having over these girls. And finally the boys were like, that's enough. And they just attacked these boys that were attacking them. So from their peers, they got a different education in socialization. What they learned at that time was, well, in order to get the girl you want or the things that you want, you have to fight people off around you for it. That was their social lesson that they learned. And Millie was mortified because she wanted them to turn out to be refined gentlemen. And she knew some things. She knew how the women really thought. She knew what they would really want. But the boys only saw what the other boys around them were doing. And they got caught up in it, and they ended up doing the wrong social thing, really to impress the girls in the end. So the girls got a little bit turned off by them at that point. So those are the three ways that we learn social. Either the way that Millie taught from media and pop culture and books and stuff, or from peers around us. Most people have a tendency to think that social is learned by being with friends. That's the most powerful way to learn social. That is the most confusing way to learn social, just so you know. It's a great environment to practice social, but it's an awful environment to learn social. So learning social, the proper way would be to learn it the way Millie taught it, or to learn it from our parents and grandparents. Those are a more reliable source. They have more experience with the social. They have more problem-solving abilities. They're able to help you make a plan so that you can step into a social environment and be proactive instead of just going with whatever the flow is. I often talk to new homeschool parents, and they will say to me things like, well, you know, everything's going really good with school, but we really need friends. Like, my daughter keeps asking for friends, and we need friends. Now, friends are a great thing, and I would say that people do have a bit of a need to have friends. However, honestly, they're so secondary. The friendship or those united bonds that happen in the family really can fulfill all needs for most people. That doesn't mean you don't have friends, but what I'm saying is actually, if you have a family and there's multiple children there and mom and dad are there, there is enough socialization that happens in there that that child actually is okay socially. But a wise parent has their children practice in bigger groups to hone their skills, right? And to work on some of their social training. All right. Some people are socially backward. Have you met some of those people? There's a few, right? There's a few. Honestly, it doesn't matter where you go to school as much as it does the training that you get from your parents with socialization. There are socially backward people at every type of school or not at school that there are. Usually a child turns out to be as their parents. That is the general rule, with the understanding that children should be spending the majority of time with their parents. If the children spend the majority of their time with media, then their chances of turning out with the social skills that the media represents then goes way, way up, right? Because the exposure is greater. Also with friends, it's the same thing. So in my family, I determine how much time children should actually have with friends. And we determine how many hours are there in a day, how many hours are in a week, how many hours of that are sleep, how many hours of that are meals, how many hours of that should be school, how many hours of that are religious study, how many hours, and I break it out. And then I consider the age of the child. And then I say, you know, okay, well, I've got an 11-year-old son. My 11-year-old son probably needs to have maybe 3 or 4 hours with other people, with peers in a week. So let's see, he goes to church. There's 2 hours right there that he's going to be in classes and stuff with other kids his age, probably. He's on soccer, and he does some clubs with school. Wow, he's already there. He's already met his max. But maybe we want to occasionally add an extra hour or something like that. Anyway, it sounds pretty deliberate. I believe in being deliberate, though, because I live in a neighborhood where there's all these little kids around all over. And at first, when I started homeschooling, what would happen is we would do school, and then other kids would come home, and our children would just go out and be out the whole time with all of these other people. And what they started to do was come home eating like other people. And they weren't remembering who they were. It was too much influence. Too much influence. The same thing happens when they see too many things. Too much movies. When they start to obsess about a game or about a movie or about something like that, you know that they've had too much exposure, that it's actually changing their confidence about who they are. Their identity is actually in question at that point, and they could be altering their identity. Let's talk a little bit about, let's say, mainstream kids, okay? Just mainstream kids in society. Just think of the regular. What is the social look like? If you had to describe it in words, like what words would you say social is like? What does it feel like? What does it look like? Yeah.
I would say lack of social at this point because so many kids are just texting or playing video games or things like that, and they're not engaging one-on-one.
Yeah, and you would be completely on that there's actually a lack of social. That they're not actually fully engaging. That's a wonderful assessment. So maybe we should call that disconnected. Should we say disconnected? Okay, what else?
Sarcasm.
Sarcasm.
They're always trying to put each other down and be sarcastic.
Ooh, that's an interesting thing to have witnessed. That it has to be, in order to look good, you've got to look bad, right? So they have to always be knocking somebody else down. That's bullying, right? It's mild bullying, but it's bullying. It's prideful. It's very selfish, and above all, it's insecure. So there's a lot of insecurity there, right, during those years. Yes, and then I think there was one back there.
It's all broken out into groups, like what group are you? A jock? Are you a theater person? Or, that kind of stuff where,
Right.
And if you don't fit into one of those, like where do you fit?
Right, so there's a segregation. Everybody's in their own little group of people.
And then even within that group, it's like you still have that, I want to do something to make sure I still fit in this group.
Yes. So that is called, C.S. Lewis called that the inner ring. Have you read that chapter? I forget what book that one's in. I don't think that's Abolition Man. I think that must be The Weight of Glory, probably. Anyway, C.S. Lewis wrote The Inner Ring, and basically what he says is, there's this ring, there's like a person on the outside of the ring, and there's other people inside the ring that they see inside the ring, and they want to be part of those people, right? This is what you're talking about. And so they want anything that they can do, they want to be able to get in to be with those people. And so they'll sacrifice morals sometimes. They'll become dishonest, they'll do attention seeking, they'll do mean things to other people, like whatever it takes to try and attain their goal to make it inside the ring. So when the person makes it inside the ring, they see another ring. There's still something else that they want, some other person's company that they want, and they work hard to try and get into that next ring, and guess what they see? Another ring. And it goes on forever and ever. Because the inner ring, or the perception that there is an inner ring, because it's a mind trick that we play on ourselves, the perception that there is an inner ring really is a fallacy, And he says that this is incredibly socially debilitating for a person. It is the opposite of confidence. It's the opposite of achieving something. So people feel like they're achieving something. In a way, they just put themselves more and more and more in bondage because they're holding some expectation for themselves that they will sacrifice anything for, instead of, the opposite, which is self-governing, right? The person to go, I want to be this kind of a person, I want to choose to have happiness, and so I'm going to choose to have this kind of a mindset and learn this kind of a skills. Instead of taking the power upon themselves, they extrinsically go looking for it. And it's really damaging. So great assessment there, great assessment. And back to your thought too about lack of socialization, I just wanted to say there, the word civilization really meant, the whole idea of creating civilizations was creating environments where people would be more civilized. Meaning, because people lived near each other in closer proximity, they would go to churches together, right? They would raise their level, their moral level, because there were other people around that a bad decision might matter to, that kind of thing. In our current society, I completely agree with you that actually the more urban, the more innovation, the more we live on top of each other, the less civilized we are becoming. The less, in fact, it's almost like we're uncivilizing each other, just like you mentioned. I loved that thought, by the way. There was another, yes?
Yeah, I was going to say something similar, just that socialization, like people think someone who's social is like the person at the center of the group. You know, that people can be a part of, you know, a group of, but there's always someone at the center, and if you ask, like, who's the most social person, it would be that person, like, almost popularity, that people's idea of what a social person is the person that has the most friends, that the most people kind of pull around.
So let's write a little list here. So the social nowadays for kids looks like popularity and maybe like popularity contest, or trying to determine popularity and assess that. We've said it's also connection. And we've said that it also looks like, well, bullying. We'll just call it bullying for short. And did I miss any? What else? Anything else we need to add to that list?
I think that so many young, not just young people, but people in general, are disrespectful. They have no respect for anybody, including themselves. A lot of them, you can tell that by the way they dress, or lack of clothing, I should say.
Disrespectful, we would have to say, in manner
And act, yeah.
and grooming, right?
I mean, that's how I feel.
But this is like so would we call that, I mean, that's sort of a conformity, right? So maybe we'll just add that there's a conformity, oops, I don't know what I'm writing. Oh, that's ugly. Anyway. There's a social conformity too, so it's almost like expected that people would be disrespectful, right? Yeah, what else? Anything else? Yes?
My husband was homeschooled, and he said when he finally went to public school, he said it was really uncool to respect or to listen or to learn at all. So he felt like it was really just backwards to go to public school to learn.
Yes.
And I felt the same way, and it's probably not the same for everyone, but for what he experienced and I experienced, I felt like it was like warped, and yeah, it was confusing. Good word.
Yeah,
very
really, really confusing. In fact, one of my foster daughters, she was brilliant. And I had to do homework with them every day. Like, that was part of my job description for a certain period of time. She would come home from school. We would work on these major research papers. In the summer, she would pull out the encyclopedia and just start reading sections of it. She loved to learn and loved to study. She, however, would get F's on everything. I did the homework with her. It was done. And I'd go into parent-teacher conferences, and they would say, well, she's failing this. She hasn't turned anything in. Like, I did that with her. Like, I did that. They're like, they look at you like, yeah, right, you know. But I'm like, no, really. And so then I talked to her about it, and I said, where are these things? Now you have to do them. And she said, well, I already did them. And I said, well, I know, but you didn't turn them in. And she's like, I can't. I said, why can't you turn them in? She said, I'll lose all my friends. And I thought, are you kidding me? She said, I can't. If I'm all of a sudden one of the smart kids, I can't be one of the smart kids. And I thought, and you don't see this as messed up? Let's have a discussion. You know, so we had to try and create a new paradigm for her, because that's what she had been groomed socially. There are a few other things. I don't know if you would agree with me, but we mentioned low self is a big one. depression, lots of depression that happens with kids nowadays. And self-doubt, I would say. A lot of self-doubt. What about also, I should probably have said here, lack of connection. But what also about just distracted? Distractions? Have you seen the distractions? There's kind of a lot of them. So this is a pretty bleak picture, yes?
So my husband was homeschooled for a fair amount of his childhood,
Uh-huh.
and he struggled really hard with the social aspect when he got out into the work environment. So he joined the military, and I don't know if it's, I grew up military, so I don't know if it's different in the civilian world, but there's something that we call the game that is played in social aspects. So the game basically is, I will protect myself and make myself popular in order to get higher up on the ladder, or in order to be in charge of you, or in order to look good. And so instead of progressing in, let's say, a company or in the military because you are good at your job and you put work and effort into it, you progress because it's not what you know is who you know. And we call it the game. And why I call it the game is because everyone will do something completely evil and untrustworthy and wrong to everyone else in their environment and their work group in order to get ahead.
Okay, so we have to add to our list that there's a lack of trust, for sure, right? Lack of trust. There's this thing called the game. I like that term, actually. That's very interesting. This thing called the game, where you have to impress other people in a certain way, or appease certain people, or whatever it happens to be. Very interesting, and that's really true. I mean, this is kind of where we get into, I mean, it goes back to this in a way, because it's the click thing, right? Q-U-E? Huh? I think so. Anyway, not a great speller, just so you know. Anyway, but this is a bleak picture. So I look at this and I think of our children and I think, what are they up against? I mean, also we have, addictions. We didn't add that. There's addictions, lots of that nowadays, and habits. So there's lots of bondage through addiction. It's huge. Gaming, all that kind of stuff. Just so you know, having an online gaming addiction leads to porn addiction. I mean, like all the time. Playing Minecraft and obsessing about little games like that, the same thing happens to your brain as an addiction, like a porn addiction. It's the same thing. You get the same obsession and the same, your chemicals fire different when you watch it. So it's not that a person maybe should never play a video game, but boy, we got to be careful, right, with our children, don't we? And set certain limits for that and that kind of thing. So if you had to say, what does the social look like for adults nowadays? Same. Isn't it the same? It's pretty interesting, isn't it? Like, this is what it's like. And as bleak as that is, I mean, there are maybe a few bright spots here and there, but the majority of people, because of this, they feel very alone. They feel very hopeless. They feel very depressed. I mean, depression's at all-time highs and that kind of thing.
So one of my nieces in her school, she had 3 of her friends commit suicide, and then she tried to also, and she thankfully wasn't successful, but that seemed to be this new.
It's actually in style.
Yeah, it was very strange.
It's actually in style. Same with cutting. homeschool. I never taught them any math, any science. Honestly, if they get who they are, who God is, what the point in life is, they're good to go. They're already heads and shoulders ahead of everyone else. It doesn't even matter if they don't learn math. I mean, still teaching you. I don't want all the math curriculum people to come out. Anyway, okay. So, of course I didn't stay on my list of where I was going. Okay, what is the goal socially? What is the goal of any social? Let's think of 7 Brides for 7 Brothers. What was the goal?
Married.
They wanted to get married. That is the goal. And do you know, for a millennia, that is the goal for social. People would say maybe nowadays that the goal would be like, to know people, to be able to get along with people, all that kind of stuff. No, that's actually what you learn when you're learning social skills, is how to get along with people and that kind of thing. The goal is to find a person to marry. That is the goal. What is the attitude about marriage nowadays? It's not so good, is it? No, not so good. The very first time I gave this presentation, there was a gentleman there, bless his heart, he had a lot of struggles, physical struggles that he had to deal with. And he was kind of had a hard time speaking. But he was just so adamant when we talked about this. He said, my goal, I have all these problems, but I worked on all of them because I only need one friend. And she's the friend that I'm going to have forever and ever. And that's what it's all about. And I found my friend. And it was all worth it. He had to master even so many physical deformities and issues that he had. And it was so beautiful to hear him testify of that. That it all is about that. How do we, in our even marriages, how do we treat each other? Hopefully the answer is good. Hopefully the answer is awesome, best friend. We consult together. We don't micromanage and nag each other. Not us. We don't do that. Hopefully that's the answer. Because if that's the goal for your children, what you show them in your home with your marriage is huge. Really, really big. So, read stories that end in marriage. It's a great thing to do as a homeschooler. Read stories that end in marriage. Happy endings. Those are good things. Now, of course, not every story ends in marriage. There are situations that don't turn out that way. But even the people that don't have the ideal. I have a wonderful friend. She was very abused. In fact, I have 2 friends, both of them very abused. One of them, worse than I ever even thought possible. I didn't know a person could even have it within them to think to treat a person the way that this woman was treated. Yet, she had to flee her husband, hide, change her identity, the whole thing to save the lives of her children because he killed one of them. She still values marriage so highly, even though she doesn't have it for herself. And I watch her teach that to her children. That's the ideal. That's the goal. That's what we're supposed to do. As parents teaching children about social, we would absolutely sell them short if we say things to them that would discourage that. That doesn't mean we start them dating when they're 9 and, none of those kinds of things that nowadays are happening. They're not happening because of marriage. They're happening because there's a common philosophy out there that actually started probably from the Kinsey Institute that says all people are sexual people and they need to have a sexual need met. And that people like to entertain those sexual needs. There's not. I could talk at length about dating and courtship and about how we do that in our family. That's something you should decide. How is it that you're going to be doing? I don't like those signs. Okay. hardly have any time left. Let's get into the 5 things, okay? The 5 things that you need to know that every child must know. Number 1 is roles. They need to understand roles. I'm sure there's some sort of cleaner that can make this way better for me. Okay. Anyway, I love the word roles. I love words, period. Always am looking up words, trying to understand them even more. I looked in my 1828 dictionary for the word role, R-O-L-E, and it was not there. They did not have the word role, R-O-L-E, defined in the 1828 dictionary. So it's still a fairly new word. However, they did have the word role, R-O-L-L. Well, the word R-O-L-L actually is the reason why we have the word R-O-L-E. If you look up the word R-O-L-L, what it means is it means something that is round, so circular in nature. It also even means eternal, so continually going around and around. That is what role means. So the way that we got this was there were these playwrights, people like Shakespeare, for instance, or someone who would write plays. Well, it was too much money oftentimes for them to get their little plays printed out and that kind of stuff, and especially the first time they would do a play, they would have to write out the whole thing. But usually what they would do is they would just write out your parts. And then they would roll it up and they would tie on a bow. And there was a certain day where the playwright would hand out the parts to everyone, and this was called roll day. It was the day that you got your roll of paper. And it symbolized your character in the play, who you were supposed to be. That was your role. Anyway, so children need to understand their role, their character in the play, in life. What's happening? Now our roles change, right? They're cyclical. We actually, start as having a baby role and a toddler role and a young child role and an older child role and then a youth role and a young man role, and we go around, grandpa role. I mean, it keeps going. And it means different things at different stages of our life. And our roles are very self-evident because they're based upon oftentimes our age, our marital status, being born, that kind of thing. So oftentimes I will ask youth, I will say, let's talk about roles. What is the role of mother? Because that's the easiest one. What's the role of mother? Anyone?
Children.
They have children. Is that what you said?
Yeah, take care of children.
Take care of children. So nurture.
Keep them alive.
Keep people alive. So protect. Yeah, nurture, protect,
Love.
safety. Love, absolutely. They are the reminder of love. That feeling of safety comes with that feeling of love. Yeah, absolutely. Teacher? Can someone say teacher?
Teacher.
Yeah, absolutely teacher. Okay, what about father? What's the role of father? Provider, absolutely. Protector. They also protect the family. Teacher, absolutely teacher. Mothers and fathers can teach uniquely, different things. That's why children need both, if at all possible. Yeah. Okay, so then I'll say to the youth, what is the role of 15-year-old boy? And you know what they say? They say this. They're not sure. They just like think, So then I say, well, what do you do with your whole day? That should help you. Like, what's your whole life about? And then they're like, learning, I guess. Oh, so you're a learner. What else? If you had to say 15-year-old son, what's the role?
Preparing.
Oh yeah, they're in preparation. It's kind of like an apprentice time, right? Apprentice for adulthood. Yep, absolutely. What else?
Short helper.
What's that?
Helper.
Oh yeah, helper, of course. They're supposed to be, they're in a great time to give service, aren't they? And to learn character building, actually, is what you're talking about. When you give help and service, then you develop a character. Yeah, this is great. So you ask your children this, it's a really interesting thing. Because, oftentimes they feel so entitled. In our society, we have raised entitled people. I talked a little bit about that the other the things that helps set that straight. Them understanding their role. So if mom and dad are teacher and they are learner, this is perfectly compatible, right? If ever the son who is 15 tries to be teacher of the parents instead of learner, then everyone's in bondage, always. In order to succeed socially, a child must understand their role in the home first. Then they can understand their role in the society at large. Their role in the society at large relates directly to their role in the home, which teaches them their role with God. Roles are vital. This is a topic I could talk for like a good hour about, just roles, because it's so very, very important. There are a lot of things that destroy roles, and we've hit on some of those things. One of them is, I should just add it to the list. Well, it's kind of like this one. I call it sameness disease. One of those problems that leads to getting rid of role and them understanding their role is sameness disease. They see somebody else, this other person has this thing, or is doesn't respect their parents or whatever, and so they feel like, well, I've got to be the same as them, because that's how it works socially, and so then they leave their roles behind. They start pretending they're something that they're not. It's so important for them to understand their identity. Did you know parents form identity? There's a lot of racket out there about identity nowadays. I go to the United Nations and talk to people at the United Nations about identity. Identity comes from, and there's a great book called Defending Identity. It's written by Nathan Sharansky. Nathan Sharansky was a prisoner in the Gulag in Russia during the early 1980s, late 1970s. He was there for 11 years. The day before he went into the Gulag, he was married to the girl of his dreams. They were married one day. And then he was in prison for 11 years because he wanted freedom. He was a Jew. He talked about how they tried to threaten him, intimidate him, instill fear in him. And he said, my family, my wife taught me who I was, and my parents taught me who I was. I knew who I was. And they taught me to love God. And I knew that if I feared them, then I would not fear God. And I had to fear God more than I feared them. My identity is my purpose, and it comes from my family, and it comes from my God. It's a beautiful story that he explains of how he, knowing who he was, protected him and his ideals when he was in prison in horrible conditions for 11 years. That's an awful long time. Number 2 is truth versus traps. Your children, so we'll put a number 1 here. Number 2 is truth versus traps. I could spend a ton of time here, but I'm just going to say the children need to understand the truth. They need to see the truth, and you are the one that teaches it. If you're not there, they won't see it. They won't see it. So my children that are homeschooled, when they turn 12 and they start going to youth groups at the church, my husband just shows up. He gives them a ride, sits in the corner, watches. Then as we drive home, talks to the son and said, I noticed so-and-so was attacking you for homeschooling. I noticed you handled it in this way. This is kind of aggressive. The best way for you to handle it when somebody doesn't understand a choice you make is to do it like this. We help our children adjust to the social. We don't just turn them over to the social. We actually train them. We prepare them for the social. The same thing happens with the girls. Another thing that we do in our family that I feel like is foundational to creating the scholars that we've had is at age 11, which is a really pivotal age. At age 11, they have training. They have apprenticeship training. If they are a boy, they train with mom and dad, or with dad. If they are a girl, they train with mom. And the training happens in a way where it's like, what are you interested in? Oh, I really want to sing barbershop. Okay, well, let's try out for this barbershop chorus. Don't tell me that. Let's try out for this barbershop chorus. So the barbershop chorus practiced once a week. My son tried out for it. He made it. My husband had to try out for it. They would go every week to be with men. Now this is the other thing at 11. When we do the apprenticeship, the boys go and be with men, real men that can nurture them and be examples. Not with kids their own age. They're going to see those people around other places. And the girls go be with women. Me and my daughter joined an a cappella women's chorus. Me and my other daughter right now that is 13, we do family history every single week together and study the lives of our ancestors. And we go work with other adults at family history centers. We work on a project together. We create a very tight friendship and relationship, and we also get nurturing from other adults around. I will never forget my son's Eagle Court of Honor. It's different than any other Eagle Court of Honor I've ever seen. And that's because 50 men in barbershop shirts and uniforms walked into there and all sat together. And at a point during his Eagle Court of Honor, they got up and they sang to him. And they said, "He is our friend. We are so excited for Quinn. We had to drive all the way out here to Tooele to sing to him and to celebrate with him for this great accomplishment." He talked with them more than he did the other kids that were in the room. Those were his people that taught him what it meant to be a man. And starting at age 10, he started to become a scholar too. He saw life with new eyes. Teach them the truth about who they are. Traps is like sameness disease. It's the things that will get them hung up in life. Teach them to know how to find the right answers, which means they gotta know how to pray. That is important. They've got to know how to get answers from God so that they are not stuck listening to everything else that's going on around them in conversation by people who are well-meaning but are probably confused. Number 3 is, what is it? Okay, understand. You guys, I'm just going to have to breeze through this or I'm going to get in trouble. Understand what people want. Seeking to understand our children in their moments of, having a hard time is one of the best ways we teach them to understand each other, but also having deliberate conversations with them about things like, you're going to be going on a date now. You're starting dating. Do you want to get dates with this guy again? And of course they say, well, yeah. Well, let me tell you what he wants from the date. He wants to have a really good time and feel really good about himself. He wants to feel like that he impressed you. So ask him questions. Don't do all the talking yourself. Ask him about him so that he can tell you things. Do you see how these little things that we can teach them about what people think? I had a conversation with a mother earlier today, and she was talking about her son and how he sometimes doesn't see that he's talking with his friends when he should be listening to other people. Well, how eye-opening would that be if the mother said to the son, "Did you know that when you're talking like that in a big group and everyone else is trying to listen, that people are actually thinking this about you? It might be actually negative. Even if they love you, they might be a little bothered by you. And they might, attach that onto you." And really because what they want is they want to be able to hear. You've got to remember that when you're in a social setting, what other people want. That doesn't mean you sell your values or morals or anything for what people want, but.
Can I ask a question? I know you're out of time.
Absolutely.
Understand what people want. The balance between, because I'm the type of person, I don't care what anybody thinks about me. And I kind of want my kids to feel that way, but also to respect. So that balance of
balance I've been trying to make in my mind, because they're
Well,
really
it's
young.
not necessarily about being socially pleasing, otherwise it's sameness disease, isn't it?
Right, so,
Yeah, so you have to have integrity with yourself, which means there has to be a lot of principles training that has to happen. There has to be a lot of truth that has to already have been established. Read books, discuss the books. Don't just let your child read and say, oh great, they're a good reader. Discuss with the children. Keep reading with your children, even when they're 15. There is a time every day I read with my children. We read scriptures, but we also read something all the time. Even my big kids still like to hear me read and still like to discuss with me. In fact, it's one of our favorite family things. So if you're surrounding them with truth, then they will be able to see. If I want to have influence in business, in the world, then part of my social is that I need to know how to help people get what they want. The real things are important. Number 4 is how to communicate. You guys already know I'm like the teaching self-government lady, right? I was going to tell you about sodas, but I can't. They're a problem-solving exercise which helps people understand communication so well. But learning self-government, learning how to communicate with others, learning how to disagree appropriately, follow instructions, all these books and things that I talk about are all part of knowing how to communicate. If a person does not know how to calmly voice their own thoughts and feelings to another person, they are in bondage in a social situation. They should be able to feel fully confident communicating their thoughts, even if it is a disagreement with somebody else. And the only way is to already have the skill of being able to disagree in an appropriate way ahead of time. And so the last one goes with the sodas. The last one is problem solving. A person needs to know how to problem solve. Thinking is the very hardest thing that we do. The hardest, being able to think. And quite frankly, in our education system today, even in some of the homeschool things we do, we are not training people to think well enough. We're still teaching them to come up with an answer that's written in the book as the answer. We're not letting them fully reason something out because it takes more time. We don't often have the patience for the thinking. They need to know how to think. The front parts of their brains, the logical part, are not fully developed until between the ages of 18 to 24. We have to continually nurture that. And that's what these exercises, the SOTAS exercises do. And they are all written, in this book and throughout the things that I teach. I just want to leave you with one final note, because I've obviously gone way too long. But my final thought is this. Socialization does matter. It absolutely matters. It's massive. It's key to the happiness of a person. The people who ask you, what about the social, don't actually even understand that. They're right, though. It does matter. And as homeschoolers, we have no excuse. We are with our children all the time. We should be focusing on training them socially, teaching them to govern themselves, teaching them to communicate with other people, problem solve, and to be socially above even the other people. Because people that are just left with friends get the wrong social development. Parents, like Millie in 7 Brides for 7 Brothers, are the very best trainers for the social in the world. It is self-evident. God designed it.